Took a little bit of a break coming into the new year as there was a bit of a lull in the tournament scene, but now I'm back. The tournaments are back and we're starting off the new year right. And the reason I'm coming to you on Monday instead of, my normal other days of the week is I noticed a lot after doing Tournament Tacticians, my Friday tournament prep, let's go into the weekend. Here's how you prep for these kinds of things. I noticed that around like Monday, Tuesday, I had a lot of knee-jerk reactions to what I had just witnessed over the course of the tournament weekend through casting and just talking with other players and how the weekend actually played out. And then I'd sort of have to pigeonhole myself into waiting until Friday to actually talk about any of this because that's when my tournament prep video was, and that's what that video is about. So I decided, screw it, we're going to throw that out the window. Now on Fridays, I'm still going to be doing Tournament Tactician where I prep you into the weekend, but on Mondays, I do want to give you my thoughts on what I saw over the course of the weekend, where the tournament meta stands, and maybe you can get a read of what you need to test over the weekend. Sort of doubling up on tournament videos throughout a week will hopefully help you prep a little bit better, will help me stay more on top of the meta, because of course doing videos forces me to look these things in the face and retain them a little bit better because I'm thinking about it more throughout the week. So that's what we're doing here. That's what we're doing for the foreseeable future. That said, this is supposed to have a more casual air about it. I'm not really trying to dive into statistics and do a lot of legwork to be like, hey, this is the play percentage of this deck versus its top percentage, and this is what the top 3 players from these 4 tournaments ran, and here's where the numbers coincide. Rather, I watch a shit ton of Legends of Runeterra. That's kind of what I do as a caster. I'm watching these games, I'm casting them, I'm retaining the information. So instead, I just want to point out what I've been noticing, some trends that are sticking out to me as somebody who just watches and takes in a lot of competitive Legends of Runeterra, and maybe I can help interpret that information for you, or maybe you get something else out of it. I just want to help you guys succeed in a tournament setting, and maybe something like this is all you need to like flick that last switch in your brain to get you to understand, what the meta looks like and how you can go on and beat that. So with all that said, there are 6 decks that really stood out to me over the course of the weekend. They were Feel the Rush, Plaza, Gohard, Zoe Lee Sin, Invoke, and Shen Fiora. And by Plaza, I mean specifically Targon. There really wasn't as many Scouts or Hecarim, any other kind of Plaza than I really expected, but there are some key differences in Plaza that I'll get into here when I actually look at that list. Instead, I want to start off talking about Feel the Rush, but before that, I do want to mention really not a lot of Ezreal Draven. I expected more of that deck, especially with how much I've seen people talking about it lately. And I did also expect more Plaza, but we'll save a little bit of that for later. Instead, we're going to start off with Feel the Rush. Now, this deck is still being toyed with a little bit. I don't think we're ever really going to settle with a list on this. You're not going to see everybody running the exact same 40 cards at any point. Things like Alpha Wildclaw and the Rekindler are still things that people are really playing with. You don't even see Grasp of the Undying in every list. Some players have even started to go down to 2 copies of Feel the Rush. And this one Rekindler is something that I'm seeing pop up more and more. Now, Feel the Rush isn't something that you can build to beat anymore. It is instead something that falls into a lineup to beat other decks. For example, if you want to bring a lineup to beat Gohard, you're probably going to have Feel the Rush in that lineup. Conversely, even when Feel the Rush was supposed to be oppressive, when Feel the Rush first came out and War Mothers got pushed to the side and everybody was like, all right, this is it, this is going to be the Feel the Rush meta, it was actually a Scouts meta. People were not playing Feel the Rush as much as you expected them to, and there were more than tournaments that I can count where there was 1, maybe 2 Feel the Rush across the top 8, and it was just players going, hey, actually, we can just beat this with Scouts pretty consistently, as well as 2 other decks, be it Shen Fiora, just any kind of aggro decks, especially since a lot of us were trying out a lot of different formats in that time, be it the Riot format, Unified, Side Deck, was something that people tried in, I believe, it was either right before the Feel the Rush meta or in the Feel the Rush meta, but the point is, you really can't build to beat this because it's only showing up in, like, counter Gohard lineups. And before the latest set came out, Cosmic Creation, I did feel like Feel the Rush had a pretty good Zoe Lee Sin matchup, and I feel confident saying that because I said it, I had a friend that disagreed with me, we ran the matchup a few times, I was absolutely stomping him with this deck. Basically, there's just too many things to deny. You have to deny all my Vengeances, or you lose your Lee Sin, you have to deny my Feel the Rush as well, and you just don't deal with an Alpha Wildclaw particularly well unless you can get your Lee Sin down, and as we can actually see here out of this list, there's no Frostbite effects. I expect that is going to change as Lee Sin Zoe does seem to be sort of the new boogeyman rising up out of the ashes that was this first tournament weekend of 2021. So keep that in mind. Probably going to see more Frostbite, although there has been a change to Lee Sin. Notably, if you haven't played the game in a while, Lee Sin will still now kick you back to the hand, even if he goes down to 0 attack. It's not how it worked previously. It's been working that way for, I want to say, a month, maybe 2 months now, and Riot has said that, yes, this is intended. This is the way that Lee Sin is going to work going forward. So maybe even if we are in a Lee Sin meta, you're not going to see as many Frostbite effects as you had in previous Lee Sin metas, just because of that change to the champion. All right, next up we have Gohard. Obviously, Gohard is still very good. This deck is probably going to be good until things fall off. This was actually just not really a homebrew list, but just I wanted to show you some examples of things that I'm seeing, a lot of trends. We have seen so many players on 3 Twisted Fate to at least 1 Gangplank. That has almost become the norm. I haven't seen triple Gangplank, triple Twisted Fate in a very long time. Twisted Fate Elise, 3 and 3 on that is something that I see maybe 30% of the time, but I want to say that 70% of players have actually gone for this triple split. Maybe that's not the case on ladder. Maybe that has actually changed, but 2 weeks ago at the start of the Cosmic Creation meta, that's really started to pop up en masse. Not a whole lot has changed going into this weekend. Another adaptation, Cursed Keeper, is really absent from the list. Nobody's playing that anymore. These numbers are pretty falsified. A lot of people are on 2 Ladros or multiple Vengeance. I've seen a lot of 1 of Withering Whales, but I put Wiggly Burblefish in here because I have seen players starting to experiment with this card a little bit more. A couple of people ran the numbers for me. I didn't fact check them, but apparently there are only 10 1-cost spells between Shadow Isle and Bilgewater, and that means that you do have a 10% chance to get Gohard. What you're really using this for, though, is sort of a post-Ladros damage push. You drop a Ladros, you drop 1 to 2 Burblefish in the same turn. This card is pretty much always going to cause a 0 when you actually get it out there. But I just don't know if that's something that's really worth it, especially since Gohard and Zoe Lee Sin seem to be the decks that are going to be in nearly every lineup going forward. If you're just talking about stock lineup, you start with Gohard and Zoe Lee Sin, and then you figure out whatever third deck you want to play. We are back to a time when power lineups exist. We're just coming out of a couple of months of metas where it didn't feel like there was a power lineup of, hey, you want to play 3 decks, you just bring these 3 decks every single time. We went into a lot more counter metas looking to specifically target out 1 deck, but now we've got so many different powerhouses that we can get away with doing everything. Gohard is probably the most vulnerable of these decks. You can build an anti-Gohard lineup a lot more easily than you can build a Zoe Lee Sin or an anti-Zoe Lee Sin lineup, as Fresh Lobster found out this weekend when he tried to run one and unfortunately did not have a lot of success with it. Now, the merit of that can be argued. Maybe Lobster just had a bad weekend. Maybe not. Who knows? He's a very good player. I trust his word on this one, and I was kind of coming to the same conclusions myself, so it's nice to have some confirmation on something like that. But yeah, Gohard, absolutely going to stick around. We do have a balance patch coming next week. We're almost certain that Gohard is going to be hit in some way, though I would not expect it to be a significant hit. We're thinking maybe you take away the drain on Gohard. The ones that I've heard most commonly are take away the drain on Gohard, make Pack Your Bags cost 4 so that once you have Pack Your Bags, it can't be searched off of Zap Sprayfin. Also, it's just a little bit more of a mana commitment so that you're not constantly having to play around Pack Your Bags, because it's very rare that somebody totally taps out in Legends of Runeterra and doesn't hang on to at least 1 measly spell mana. And I've also heard it doesn't shuffle in copies when it doesn't actually hit the target. For example, you throw this at a Pool Shark, they glimpse beyond the Pool Shark, you don't shuffle in any copies of Gohard. That one I think would kill the deck in the long run, but we'll see. For now, going into this upcoming weekend, I would expect this deck to still be extremely popular. Next up, we have Invoke. This is one of my favorite decks. This is sort of a simplified version. It actually looks really small in comparison to the other decks, but essentially Zoe and Diana are just really great utility champions. Diana really helps pull other Zoes out of the way for your Zoe to get through, and you're just, sort of a standard Invoke deck. Your win condition is going to be Great Beyond, and Atrocity is something that players have started to put in the deck because, hey, if my win condition is going to be a Great Beyond, then Atrocitying a large spell shield unit is something that a lot of decks do not handle particularly well. This one is still sort of fringe playable, by which I mean, or rather fringe popular. I think it's a very good deck. I think it's got some good matchups across the board. You really can beat anything with this deck. That's sort of what it goes for, and it also has more good matchups than it has bad matchups. But let's say you're playing against, I want to say literally anything. If you just find Cosmic Inspiration, that's basically the end of the game, right? We can all kind of get behind that sentiment, and you have a lot of chances of finding it in a deck like this. But outside of that, it's just very versatile. It's very fun to play. I like this deck a lot, and it's been pretty popular. It's been performing well for the players that are bringing it, and I don't think it's going anywhere, and I love it. Lee Sin's back, baby, and there's been a lot of debate about, Sparklefly or Zoe, and the analysis that a couple of people have been giving is that this deck attacks you on 3 fronts, and all 3 of the fronts it attacks you on, at least one of those will beat every other deck in the game, be it the Lee Sin plan, the Sparklefly plan, or the level Zoe plan, and, whatever other kind of plan you need to. It's really easy to just pick something to pillar on in this deck, and Sparklefly and Mountain Goat, and even Eye of the Dragon isn't a bad pillar, and it just offers you a lot more than the Z version did, because now you have a little bit more versatility in the way that you get to beat other aggro decks. Sparklefly will just sit there and outrace them, very similar to the old Kinku Lifeblade standalone decks that we saw way back in the day, and you're really strong, you're really versatile, you're 2 of the best regions in the game in terms of counterplay. I mean, anything that has access to Hush, Notify, and Deny, and Bastion is going to be a tough nut to crack, and Zoe Lee Sin does it beautifully, does it all. If you're tired of seeing Lee Sin, I'm sorry, this was one of the most popular decks on the weekend. A lot of players are saying that this is it, man. This is probably one of the best decks in the format, top 3 easily, and you're going to see a lot of it going forward. And honestly, I don't know what they would do to it, and I don't necessarily know that it's going to get hit in the balance patch next week, just because I've heard a lot of different rumors about how far in advance the balance patches are planned out. This is sort of the halfway point. I know it doesn't feel like it, but this is our halfway point patch coming up between us and the seasonal tournament, which is going to be in mid-February, because this balance patch that we're getting is going to be, it's the 4th now, so on like the 15th of January, so that's probably the only one that we're getting before the seasonal, so I would be a little remiss if they didn't do something to this, although I've heard a lot of people talking some wild stuff about what to do to Sparklefly, between make it a 1-1, make it a 0-2, up its costs, anything like that. Only time will tell, but if this doesn't get touched, expect this to be everywhere in the seasonal. There was one guy that topped with Garen Aurelion Soul Plaza, which is a list that I haven't been able to find, and he deleted his deck list as soon as the tournament was over off Mobilytics, so the link doesn't work anymore. I couldn't actually find it. The Leona A-Soul deck is pretty cool. I don't know how standard this version of it is. As you can see, every follower in the deck is a Daybreak follower, and the problem that I've found with this versus the Garen list, I would assume the Garen list is running things like Grizzled Ranger and some of the other more standard Demacia package cards, because you don't have Leona, you take out Ravoon and probably Solari Priestess, but the problem that I had with the Leona version, because this is one of the decks that I first built when the new set came out, is that Solari Priestess doesn't fit with Plaza really at all. Solari Priestess sticks out like a sore thumb in this deck, and anybody who has ever played this deck can probably attest to that. It comes down as a 2-3. It's really only in here because you need more Daybreak cards to level your Leona, and this is probably the best anti-Plaza deck, which is why you go for Leona instead of Garen, because your opponent needs to develop into your board because they're playing Grand Plaza. You throw down any Daybreak card, you stun whatever unit they just played. Your Ravoon Leona combo gets a lot done here, and your opponent is pretty light on removal because they thought that their challengers were going to be all the removal that they needed. So you can establish that lock pretty easily and maintain it. And any concerted strikes or single combats that they do, you can just single combat or concerted strike them right back in response and come out on top of that interaction. So it feels like a very good anti-Plaza list. I think Garen is going to continue to be a little bit more popular because Plaza isn't really that popular right now. And definitely people aren't running the same versions. I saw, 3 different versions of Plaza, or 4 different versions of Plaza over the course of the weekend between Scouts, Leona, Garen A-Soul, and Hecarim Lucian. So only time will tell which one's going to come out on top. It's probably going to be a Targon version. It's just a matter of, is it going to be Leona or is it going to be Garen? Because while Solari Priestess does stick out like a sore thumb, Invoke is a broken mechanic. And I'm expecting some great Beyond nerfs relatively soon as well. So we'll see how this sticks around post-patch. But that's next week, so I'll have another one of these before that, so we'll see. Now, I know you've all seen Shen Fiora a million times at this point, so I just want to talk about the adaptations that players have been making with this over the course of the last couple of weeks, and the implications of Zoe Lee Sin on a deck like this. So first of all, Swiftwing Lancer has been popping up more and more. Players are just realizing that Screeching Dragon is probably the primary secondary win condition of this deck. If you're playing against a deck that handles Fiora pretty well, then they probably don't handle Screeching Dragon super well. This is generally how you're going to win the game against anything where the Fiora win con doesn't get to pop off. A lot of players have, nearly every player actually, I would say with confidence, has switched over to the Tiana Crownguard Brightsteel formation top end as a 1-1. No longer do we have to worry, okay, who's got 2 Brightsteel formation, who's only playing 1. Everybody that I've seen is on the Tiana Brightsteel formation approach. Spirit's Refuge is more popular than it's not, I want to say, just because there are so many things like Ezreal Draven and Plaza still in the format. These aggressive decks, they're still out there, they still exist. You need a little bit of lifesteal in the deck, but just a little bit, just enough to get it done. And of course, 2 Riposte, not super standard, but the one thing that I did want to touch on is this. With Zoe Lee Sin, you now have a very, very solid start to a triple Ionia lineup. If you want to pick on Gohard or just pick on anything that you say, hey, you know, I really hate this deck. I noticed that Nopify does very well against it. I want to, how do I Boulevard? How do I not lose to this deck ever? Step 1, Shen Fiora. Step 2, Zoe Lee Sin. Step 3, remains to be seen. Hopefully I'll have an answer for you on the Tournament Tactician this week, but it's not something I've given a lot of thought to. It's just, I saw a couple of triple Ionia lineups over the weekend, but I don't think anybody really impressed me with that third deck that they brought, so I'm still looking for the answer on that one. And that's going to do it for me this week. Well, today, rather, this week of whatever this series is going to be called. I guess I have to come up with a name for it now. Just kind of think of it as like an adjunct to Tournament Tactician, like, you know, the check-in for Tournament Tactician, where, you know, you play your tournament and then you go to tell your friend about how you're salty that you lost. That's what this is. That's what this is. It's a little back and forth, a little repertoire. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching as I kick off the new year with tournaments galore. January is going to be a very busy month. Duels of Runeterra is making its return relatively soon. They have yet to announce the dates. One thing that I did want to mention is at the end of the month, I have to move. And I'm trying to figure out if that's going to interfere with my casting. It probably will, but I'm trying really hard to make sure that it doesn't, because there's a lot going on then. But I will continue to try to guide you through this meta and into the seasonal tournament, and I would love to know if any of you have found my videos successful, like helpful towards, you know, grinding out tournaments or, you know, top 8ing something or doing well in the seasonal, anything like that. It'd be super cool. I want you guys to succeed in tournaments. Just have the knowledge to do so. So anyway, my name is Boulevard. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, good luck in your tournaments.